We truly love only when we are no longer afraid of being rejected. Carl Jung. Have you ever sat across from someone you love and felt like you didn't even exist? You said you were hurt. You shared your pain. And they just looked at you with blank eyes, silent, offering no apology. Not because they're cruel, but because they simply don't know how to show up when someone is in pain. To them, emotion feels dangerous, vulnerability feels weak, and apologizing feels like admitting they're broken. This isn't a video to blame. This is for those who are in love with an avoidant, the one who pulls away the closer you get, the one who makes you question your worth just because they can't say the one simple thing: "I'm sorry I hurt you." End of. Today, I'll show you a way to not only get them to hear you, but also help them feel safe enough to apologize without shame, without defensiveness, and without you having to beg or lose your sense of self. If you've ever felt muted in your own relationship, you're not alone. And there is a way to get your voice back, not through anger, but through emotional intelligence and real connection. Here's something you need to understand deeply. Avoidant individuals aren't incapable of apologizing. They are terrified of feeling. And apologizing, at its core, is an emotional act. Imagine walking into a room filled with unplayed childhood memories. Your father's cold eyes when you cried, your mother's emotional absence when you needed comfort, or the times you were dismissed for being too sensitive. That is the inner world of a child with avoidant attachment, a world where emotions were ignored, punished, or made to feel shameful. Growing up in an emotionally unsafe environment teaches you to disconnect from yourself to survive. You cut off sadness, anger, vulnerability. You build walls. And the thicker the wall, the less you feel pain. Avoidants carry this defense into adulthood. They don't handle emotion by facing it. They handle it by shutting down, withdrawing, denying, or intellectualizing it. To them, emotions are dangerous territory filled with chaos, loss of control, and no way to win. So when you say, "You hurt me," and ask them to apologize, you're asking them to step into a world they've spent their whole lives avoiding. It's not that they don't want to understand you. It's that to understand you, they would first have to face something inside themselves. And that is terrifying. You're talking to someone who may have been punished for crying or mocked for being weak. Unconsciously, they believe, if I admit I was wrong, I'll lose love. If I apologize, I'll become weak, small, and rejectable. If people see I messed up, they'll use it to control me. You think they're defending their ego, but in truth, they're defending a fragile, wounded part of themselves they've never dared to meet. And here's the catch. They don't see apologies as an act of connection. They see it as surrender, as a loss, as danger. While securely attached people see apology as a loving gesture, avoidants experience it as a nightmare that touches their greatest fear. I am the problem. The more you push, accuse, or demand accountability, the more they shut down. Not because they don't care, but because they have no idea what to do with the emotions that start flooding in. And so they flee. So when you ask, why won't they apologize? The answer isn't about morality. It's not about love. It's about this. They've never learned how to survive inside emotional territory. Avoiding emotion isn't just a habit. It's a psychological identity that once helped them survive. And apologizing something that feels simple to you is actually an act that threatens the very armor they've been hiding behind their whole life. But the pain doesn't stop at their inability to apologize. It runs deeper, because you're not just left unhealed, you're left unseen. And this brings us to the second root of the issue. Avoidant individuals often lack the natural ability to step into someone else's emotional experience. After you've vulnerably shared, "I felt hurt when you didn't respond to my message all day," they don't respond with empathy. They often react with confusion, defensiveness, or indifference. But what's the big deal? You just didn't hear from me for a few hours. There have been times you didn't text me back, and I didn't make it a big thing. This isn't malice. It's a form of conditioned emotional blindness, rooted in how they've learned to navigate life. They grew up in environments where emotions weren't acknowledged. No one stopped to ask, "What are you feeling right now?" Or, "Did that make you sad?" And when emotional reflection doesn't happen in critical brain development stages, the brain's ability to empathize doesn't fully form either. Developmental psychology is clear about this. A child only learns how to feel with others when someone first feels with them. If no one ever reached into their emotional world, They never learned how to enter someone else's. So you're hurting, but they can't feel that pain. Not because they don't care, but because they don't feel the world the way you do. In their mind, missing a text or a call isn't emotionally loaded. It's minor. It's not a big deal. And they project that logic onto you. If that wouldn't hurt me, then you being hurt by it doesn't make sense. If I don't think it's serious, you must be overreacting. And this is where emotional disconnection happens. You start to feel like you need to defend your feelings, like you have to write a whole thesis just to justify why your sadness is valid. And when they don't get it, you start to doubt yourself. Am I too sensitive? Am I making this a bigger deal than it is? Are my emotions too much? This is where the anxiously attached partner often begins to shrink to be accepted, to downplay their needs to avoid more disconnection. And little by little, you lose the voice of your emotions. But here's the truth. You're not too sensitive. You're just loving someone who doesn't have the emotional map to read your signals. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett's groundbreaking research shows that emotions are not raw, automatic reactions. They are constructed experiences shaped by neural learning and life exposure. In other words, if you've never learned how to feel a particular emotion, like shame, abandonment, grief, you also can't recognize when someone else is experiencing it. So when you cry, they feel uncomfortable, not because they don't care about you, but because they don't know what's happening inside you. And worse, they feel helpless. Avoidant individuals don't approach emotional discomfort with curiosity. They approach it with problem solving, not empathy. They try to fix the discomfort by making it disappear, not by understanding it. You're overreacting. You probably just need to rest. This isn't such a big deal. They think they're helping, but what they're doing is invalidating your emotional reality, and that makes you feel invisible. In those moments, you're not just sad. You feel stripped of your right to feel. And that's a deep wound that's hard to name. It's like being severed from the most basic human need, to be felt, to be heard, to be real. When you love an avoidant, you slowly realize they don't know how to be in your emotions with you. They don't know how to sit in silence supportively. They don't know how to say something soft. They don't know how to place a hand on your shoulder and simply be present. And because they don't know how, they run. Through coldness, through silence, through reasonings that make sense but feel empty. You start to wonder, am I in love with someone who can't actually see me? If my emotions aren't allowed to exist here, is this even a real relationship? And the heartbreaking truth is, yes, they don't see you, but not because you're not worth seeing. It's because they were never taught how to see anyone. And this is where their silence becomes a double-edged sword. You feel ignored while they feel cornered. From the outside, you might wonder, but isn't it just a simple apology? But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, an apology is not just an admission of fault, it feels like a self-condemnation. Deep inside, in a layer often too subconscious to name, lies a belief they've carried for years. If I'm wrong, it means I'm not good enough. If I made a mistake, it means I'm unworthy of love. If I admit fault, people will use it to control or hurt me. To you, an apology is a gesture of love, a bridge back to connection. But to them, it feels like exposing a weak spot in a world where weakness has always been punished. This might sound extreme, but it's rooted in emotional history. Maybe as a child, every mistake they made wasn't met with guidance or compassion, but with shame, punishment, or emotional withdrawal. And their young, unprotected brain came to one conclusion: never let them see you're wrong, or you'll lose everything. Oh, this isn't a conscious thought they can argue with. It becomes a core subconscious belief, shaping their adult behavior without them realizing it. So when you say calmly and kindly, "I just need an apology," they don't hear what you're actually saying. They hear something very different. Admit that you're defective. Prove that you're unworthy. Surrender to my feelings and let me win. And to escape the shame this triggers, they'll do whatever it takes not to apologize. They might deflect or counterattack. "Well, you were wrong too. You're just too sensitive. I didn't do anything wrong, you're overreacting." Or they withdraw, using logic as a shield. "I just need some time to think. Let's talk about this later, I'm busy right now." But the truth is, they're not too busy. They just don't know how to survive the shame that lives underneath. To someone securely attached, an apology is a first step toward intimacy. To the avoidant, It feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, where stepping forward would mean falling into a terrifying emotional freefall. They've spent their lives building an identity, calm, rational, emotionally in control, untouchable. And an apology, even a small one, feels like a crack in that armor. Because they've never learned how to embrace their imperfections, that crack doesn't just sting, it makes them feel like they're crumbling inside. To the avoidant, it feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, where stepping forward would mean falling into a terrifying emotional freefall. They've spent their lives building an identity, calm, rational, emotionally in control, untouchable. And an apology, even a small one, feels like a crack in that armor. Because they've never learned how to embrace their imperfections, that crack doesn't just sting, it makes them feel like they're crumbling inside. Every time you approach them with, "Can't you just admit you hurt me?" or "Why won't you apologize?" what they unconsciously hear is, "You're a bad person. You need to surrender. You're losing control." And their reaction to shut down, to withdraw, to retreat, is the only strategy they know to protect themselves from the unbearable shame rising inside. The more you lean in, the more they pull away. The harder you try to pull them out of their shell, the tighter they curl inward. And suddenly, you find yourself stuck in a draining cycle, one person trying to be seen, the other trying not to drown. No one here truly wants to hurt the other, but fear and emotional defenses now fill the space where connection used to live. So if the usual approaches don't work, then what will? How do you stand in your truth and still invite an avoidant partner to show up emotionally, maybe even apologize without feeling attacked or coerced? This is where a shift in perspective becomes the key. You stop approaching them from a place of demanding what's right, and instead, you reach them from a place of offering safety and empathy. You move from confrontation to connection, and you don't do this by shrinking or abandoning your own feelings. On the contrary, you do it from a place of emotional clarity, groundedness, and self-respect. The tool for this shift is something deceptively simple yet deeply transformative: the asking for empathy statement. It may sound basic, but the magic doesn't lie in the number of words, it lies in how it invites them into your emotional world without triggering their defenses. When you use an asking for empathy statement, you're not saying, "You need to change." You're saying, "I'd like to share how I feel, and I'd love for you to try to see it through my eyes just for a moment." You're not trying to fix them. You're not trying to guilt them. You're not forcing them to feel what you feel. You're simply saying, "I know this might not feel like a big deal to you, but it means something to me." And that's the first time many avoidant individuals feel safe enough to step into emotional territory without losing themselves. The power of the asking for empathy statement is not in persuasion, it's in how it softens the walls. It doesn't stab with accusation, it opens space for recognition. It allows them to gently touch another person's pain without feeling like they're losing power or being blamed. A simple example might sound like this: "I know you probably didn't think it was a big deal, and maybe if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't either. But for me, not hearing from you all day made me feel really anxious." It touches an old fear of abandonment I've carried. And in order to let it go, I just need to know that you understand how I felt, and if you're willing, I'd really appreciate a simple apology. That would mean a lot to me. See what happens there. No accusations, no pressure, just a human being saying, "Please see me, just for a moment." And if the person truly cares, they may see you in a way they never have before. They'll stop hearing you as a threat and start recognizing you as someone seeking connection. And it's in that moment, soft, quiet, and real, that an apology may finally come, not because they were forced to give it, but because they chose to show up for the relationship. This kind of breakthrough isn't just for the avoidant. It's a powerful shift for you, too. It's what allows you to love clearly, respectfully, and without losing yourself in someone else's emotional maze. And whether or not you choose to stay in that relationship, one thing is certain: you showed up with the most mature, integrated version of yourself. And that can never be taken away from you. This is the bridge between understanding and action. Because understanding the avoidant is one thing, but knowing how to communicate with them in a way that doesn't cause them to shut down is something else entirely. And the beauty of it is, you don't have to change who you are. You don't have to shrink your emotional needs. You don't have to pretend everything is fine just to keep the peace. What you do need is a way of communicating that's smart enough to get through their emotional armor, while still being honest enough to represent your truth with dignity. We've talked about the asking for empathy statement now. Let's bring it down to earth and see how this tool is simple, clear, and surprisingly deep. It's not long, it's not complicated, but it asks you to walk through 3 steps with emotional integrity and a clear intention to connect. Step 1. Begin with positive acknowledgement. This isn't about flattery or sugarcoating. It's the first doorway of emotional safety so that the other person doesn't feel attacked. When you start with a genuine acknowledgement, you're saying, "I see your efforts. I'm not dismissing your entire being because of this one moment." You're sending the message, "I'm not here to destroy, I'm here to connect." For example, "I see that you've been trying in this relationship, and I really appreciate that. I know you're someone who takes responsibility, and I value that. Thank you for the things you do." These kinds of simple statements can soften the walls that avoidance instinctively put up the moment emotions enter the room. Step 2. Clearly express what hurt you, but frame it from your own emotional truth, not as a judgment. Instead of saying, "You hurt me," which can sound like an accusation, you say, "I know this might not seem like a big deal to you, but it really touched something tender inside me. When I didn't hear from you, it brought up this fear of being left behind. It didn't feel good." When you speak this way, you're not attacking. You're inviting them into your inner world gently, without pressure. And you're taking responsibility for your own experience. You're not saying, "You were wrong." You're saying, "This is what happened inside me." And this gives avoidance a safe way to stay in the conversation, without feeling judged or forced to admit they're broken. Step 3. Offer a clear request, one that aims for release and reconnection, not prolonged tension. This is the part many people skip. They share how they feel, but they don't say, "Here's what I need to move forward." With avoidance, this is essential. They fear emotional conversations will spiral endlessly. They fear they'll be trapped in something with no end. So when you give them a clear exit point, a specific direction, they feel safer to step into the moment with you. For example, "I don't need a big explanation or analysis. I just need a simple apology, something that tells me you see how I felt, so I can release the hurt and move on. If you can just acknowledge how I might have felt in that moment, that's enough to help me rebuild trust and feel closer." You're not begging. You're not demanding. You're opening a door and inviting them in. This 3-part approach doesn't just work with avoidant partners. It's a model of emotionally mature communication that every relationship can benefit from. It shows that you can hold your truth while also making space for someone else to show up safely. Not everyone with an avoidant attachment style is meant to stay in your life, but not every relationship deserves to end, especially when we haven't yet tried to speak in a language they can actually hear. Sometimes, what breaks us isn't love itself, but how we try to be understood. An apology from an avoidant doesn't look like most apologies. It may not be grand or poetic, it may be a quiet glance, a soft sentence, but it's like a small door opening in a wall they've spent years building. And if you have the patience to knock gently, not break, not push, you might just get to see something few people ever witness: the tender, raw, and very lovable core they've hidden for so long. If you're in a relationship where everything is working except the way you handle emotional pain, try using the asking for empathy statement. And if they respond, if they pause and meet you there, it's a sign that the armor can open. Slowly, but genuinely, share this video with someone who loves an avoidant. Because love isn't about catching mistakes. It's about learning how to truly see each other and love each other better.